have an amazing panel of speakers.
There is this debate about the deconstruction of the American capitalistic system versus how do we position ourselves to accelerate, thrive, and take advantage of it.
We have to control pools of capital, opening up the access doors so that people can pursue the opportunities that they want to pursue.
20 years ago, the mindset was, if you build it, they will come. Now, we have to meet people where they are.
At the end of the day, what makes the company successful and grow is the people. If you don't have good people and you're not nurturing people, training people, you're not going to be successful.
We need salespeople, accountants, creators, people who come up with something that we've never had before.
We've seen the roadmap. Now the opportunity is, how do we do more of that? How do we expand that quick, fast, across the country?
Hello, I'm Chris Hairston White, and I'd like to welcome you to the 2024 Big Dipper Innovation Summit, part of the Big Dipper Experience. The summit convenes local, regional, and national entrepreneurs with big thinkers, dreamers, makers, and creators. Together, we talk about innovation and exchange insights and ideas. So sit back and enjoy. Let's shape the future together. Complexities and opportunities in the dynamic landscape of emerging technologies are full of intricacies and possibilities. A knowledgeable panel discusses funding strategies and venture capital perspectives and takes a look at a company currently driving innovation in the energy industry. Let's listen.
There is no better way to wrap up the 2024 Big Dipper Innovation Summit than talking about the technology that is here, and more importantly, the technology that's on the way. Journey to Tomorrow, Emerging Tech Opportunities does just that. This is a chance to embark on a comprehensive exploration of the ever-evolving landscape of emerging technologies. Now, this is where innovation converges with funding strategies, so we get to really understand what investors are prioritizing when they help launch and build these companies, and what drives industry transformation. This session caters not only to founders, but also to investors and professionals in innovative career paths or organizations. You're going to gain profound insights into the intricate world of navigating the dynamic frontier of emerging technologies across multiple sectors. As the summit's grand finale, we delve beyond the surface, unraveling the complexity, but also the opportunity that defines the future of technology. This conversation is hosted by Aaron Montgomery of the Montgomery Development Group, and we're joined by Luke Cooper from Latimer Ventures, Jewel Burke-Solomon from Colab Capital, and Lloyd Ely from Dominion Energy.
Well, obviously, we couldn't do an innovation summit without talking about tech. And we've got a fantastic group of panelists here to help lead that discussion. Normally, I don't like to do this and have you guys repeat your bio, but in this particular case, I actually think there are some very interesting nuances to the way you guys came about your career, and I'd love to kind of hear at least those origin stories that I know so well about all three of you. Maybe give folks that emphasis on with a particular emphasis on how you got started in the tech field and what you've learned along the way to get to where you are.
Yeah, I'm happy to launch it off. You never want to give that to the lawyer on the stage because, we get paid by the hour. But yeah, my career really began at the nexus of law, technology, and finance. I was a corporate attorney for DLA Piper, in-house counsel at State Farm, did over $250 million in transactions before I was about 26. And then from there, just got the bug for technology, wanted to just dive fully in. Built 2 technology companies over the course of 15 years. The first was a cybersecurity company that we sold to Khaki after 4 years of building it up and hustling. And the second one was a company called Fixed, which I started in 2013, raised $6.5 million of venture capital, grew it roughly 300% year over year, and then sold that company to Assurant in 2020. I was one of 3 black founders to achieve that feat that year, and it was hard work, right? Grew that company to 80 employees, 1,500 part-time workers, et cetera. But that's not where I started. Where I started was Bridgeport, Connecticut, I grew up, in project housing in Bridgeport. I'm from Providence. I say that proudly as well, with a father in prison. And overcoming those challenges, I think, puts me in a unique position to support founders that I think come from different, diverse backgrounds, challenging backgrounds that sometimes limit not only the way we think about what we can do in tech and what we can do in the world, but limit us in terms of, true financial resources and access. And so, I'm now the general partner of a firm called Latimer Ventures, which I started in 2022, April of 2022 in earnest. We are a target $50 million fund focused on enterprise tech founders, predominantly Black founders is what we invest in, who are building the next wave of modern infrastructure for corporate America.
Excellent. Luke's got an amazing story. We'll probe in some more, but particularly on this later emphasis on reaching back and funding other entrepreneurs that have similar stories. Jewel, please tell us a bit about your background.
Yes, and I'm so excited to be here. So again, I'm Jewel Burke-Solomon. I am currently managing partner at Collab Capital, but the way that I got into technology and got my start really goes back to my childhood. I was the child of 2 entrepreneurs, and before that, my grandparents also entrepreneurs and farmers. And so I got started very early, very young in business, and always knew that I wanted to become an entrepreneur. I grew up in the South, so originally from Nashville, actually born in Mobile, Alabama. So I didn't know too much about technology growing up. But when I went to school, I went to Howard University. I know I'm at Virginia State, but hopefully there's some bison in the room. But when I went to school, I was exposed to internships. So I got an internship at Google and moved out to Silicon Valley and thought, wow, this is amazing, incredible. It was 2008, 2009. And I just was enamored by what was happening at that time in technology and decided that I wanted to finish school early and get back out to Silicon Valley to learn. And so that was really my entry into the tech field, but I still had that love for entrepreneurship. And so I spent a few years at Google, then went into a totally different space in the industrial distribution space, which is far cry, and you're familiar with the McMaster car. But it was there that I discovered that there were these huge industries that needed disruption from technology. And so I kind of paired what I learned at Google, that you can solve big problems using technology, with what I was seeing at McMaster Car, which was that there were big problems in major industries that still need to be solved, and put those things together and built a company called PartPick, which if you were here yesterday, many of you heard from our CTO, Dr. Nashley Cephas. So we joined forces and built this business, and we're fortunate enough to be able to sell it in 2016 to Amazon. And in that process, I discovered that the next problem that I wanted to solve was the capital access problem, because it was way too hard for us as brilliant Black women to be able to raise the funding that we needed to grow and scale that business. So I wanted to get on the other side of the table and start to invest in Black folks who were smart, talented, capable, but were not getting the shots at building big businesses. And so that's what we're doing today at Collab.
Fantastic. Another great story of someone finding success and then reaching back. You'll hear with Jewel as we share a bit more. And also a great start in finding an actual problem that needed a solution, and then going out and marrying tech to that problem, picking up the part, and is this a widget or a widget? And then being able to solve that is a very important problem. Lastly, we've got Lloyd. Lloyd, please tell the group a bit about you.
Yeah, so my name is Lloyd Ely. I grew up in a small rural town called Windsor, Virginia. And my really exposure to technology in the renewable field actually came from my father, who worked at a local electric utility. So growing up as a child, I was able to visit him at work and learn more about the equipment and see the large equipment and how electricity actually works. And so that really kind of sparked my interest in pursuing a career in the energy field. And so similar to Jewel, I also attended Howard University, and I just learned we attended around the same time. So we have some connecting to do there. And at Howard University, I majored in electrical engineering, and my focus area there was in power system design. While attending Howard, I did perform research with a couple of my professors, and that really sparked my interest in learning more about renewable technology. It was one thing to know about how electricity worked, but it was another thing to get an interest in renewables. So from there, I graduated. I worked at a shipyard building nuclear aircraft submarines, and there I gained a better understanding of working in a maritime environment. And about 10 years ago, I joined Dominion, working as an engineer on what's called the Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind Project. And so that particular project, we built offshore wind farms off the coast of Virginia Beach. And so that allowed me to really gain a better understanding of energy and apply the information I had learned from my previous career to develop offshore wind farms off the coast of Virginia Beach.
Excellent, and a very high profile and very important project, right? This completely impact the fuel stack and generation going forward. So this is very, very big, high profile stuff. All of you have found ways to apply tech to problems. And I won't speak for everyone here, but typically when we think about tech, we're thinking about the flashy gadgets, the new fads, the things that are coming out, but yet you found the discipline to apply it in a very particular and measured way. How do people think about that, separating the tech noise and the fads from the real solutions? How were you able to navigate to those solutions and not be distracted by the shiny objects along the way?
Well, I think, particularly as Black folks, if we just look around, there are a lot of problems to be solved. And I think one of the gifts and curses of being Black in America today is that we don't necessarily always have the luxury to look at the shiny objects and the things that don't really matter, which a lot of technology that's built in Silicon Valley at the end of the day really doesn't matter. It's not really impacting anyone's lives in a positive way. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the reasons that I get excited about investing in Black founders is that oftentimes, because of just the sheer reality of the world that we live in, we are tuned into solving real problems. And so in my day-to-day, the real problem that I needed to solve was, I don't like this job. I need to figure out a way to get through this period. And so let me focus in on how can I make the best of a challenging situation. Like I mentioned, I left Google, which at that time was everyone said this is the best place to work, and went to a company that wasn't the best place to work. And so the problem for me was I am getting yelled at by customers every single day because they can't figure out the name, the part number of whatever it is they're looking for that is keeping them from making money. That was the problem that I was faced with in my job. And it really was, I'm gonna have to quit this job. I've moved all the way to Atlanta. I'm gonna have to quit this job because I'm miserable. But when I flipped it and I was like, let me listen to what they're actually saying and let me hear and just open my eyes to the reality of my situation, that's what allowed me to be able to see something that I was uniquely positioned to solve, because I had seen prior my experience at Google, technology and how it's used and how you can build things to solve problems. And now I was faced with a challenging situation personally and for customers. And so, being able to be in that seat, flip my mindset, open my eyes, and identify something. I think we are all uniquely positioned to really tune in to the realities that we are faced with and figure out, okay, how do we change it from this is a tough situation, this is a challenging situation, to this is an opportunity. And knowing now there's this world of technology, and honestly, it's become even easier. Every month, every day, it becomes easier to build tools and software and technology to solve these problems. And the advantage that we have is oftentimes we're closer to the problems. Mm-hmm. We see them. If it's not us that's experiencing it, it's someone that's close to us. And so that to me is the gift that we have that in some cases could be seen as a challenge, but it's really a gift. And so it's just a matter of how do we leverage that and build.
That's actually a really cool way to think about it. This notion that if you're more adjacent to challenges, then you're more myopic in seeing them, and then therefore you are better attuned to seeing the solutions to them as another potential benefit of diversity. Luke, it's kind of reminiscent to me of what I've heard you say about that being, the fact that where you came from is your superpower. It's what allows you to not only persevere, but to see problems in the same way. Would you more or less agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Jules said it greatly, and I echo those same sentiments. You know, I was fortunate last year to deliver the commencement speech at Syracuse, where I went to school, and I recall having a very deep conversation with that audience about like bringing your most authentic self to every room, every stage, every conversation that you have, because that's essentially our superpower, right? But how do you actually unlock like what you should build, why you should build a thing? You know, how do you scale it? All those questions I think still remain in your head, even when you think about like solving problems, right? Because a lot of us think about starting a technology company and we say, oh, okay, I'm gonna go start a technology company on the basis of an idea. And an idea is rooted in some problem that we think we have, right? But like, is it a problem that you can get paid for? Is it something that you are uniquely positioned to solve? And then how do you quantify that thing as a real problem? So I push my entrepreneurs. We have a thing that we say within my investment firm called, we say be delusional with vision, but be pragmatic when it comes to execution. And what we're saying when we say that is essentially we want you at that stage where you're trying to figure out like how to get a thing off the ground to be very, very pragmatic. You've got to think big, really, really big, and maintain that position that I am going to build an amazing company that's going to have all this extra value that it creates for a very, very long period of time. But you've got to take little tiny steps. And those little tiny steps are little mini experiments that you build that tell you, hey, this point that I'm making, this assumption that I'm making about this direction with a product or idea to build a product or introduce a product is validated or not validated, right? And so I push entrepreneurs to be very pragmatic about those steps, because the only thing that you're trading on as a young entrepreneur, as an old entrepreneur, especially, right, is your time, right? You don't have money, you don't have networks and resources and other things, you got your time, right? And so if you can't show me that you can spend your time deliberately, practically, in a manner that is gonna drive you to closer and closer to building a real thing, then like, why would you want me to give you my money, right? And so we tend to think about things that way. I think there's a bunch more we could say. There's a bunch of resources where this stuff is like, very like meted out, like Marty Kagan's book, Inspired is a great read for us. The Messy Middle is another one by Scott Belsky. These are just books, again, that are just resources that we should be leaning on, because again, I like Jules said, I believe that Black people have an outsized opportunity to win. The problems that we see and we experience, and I'm not talking about hair care products solely, right? We have those too, right? But I'm talking about hard enterprise tech problems. We typically look at those things with a wider framework, right? Our transom for understanding and digesting that problem is just wider, because we have to show up in environments oftentimes where we've got to like be, we've got to be something for this person, we've got to be something for that person, then our kids, our families, and everything else, right? And so, I say lean into those hard problems, quantify them as much as you can at the earliest stages to make sure you're not wasting your time, and then you definitely won't waste mine.
Yeah, that's great input. Lloyd, you're solving problems that aren't quite as adjacent, but they're huge, and they're long range, and they have a very long tail, and and there's probably a lot of iterations, and there's some things, but you're planning 15, 20 years in the future. How do you maintain that myopia, that sense of problem solution orientation throughout that long curve?
Yeah, so that's a great question. One of the things I always tell my team members, I always even tell different audiences when I talk with them is, even though it's one large project, it consists of multiple smaller projects that are constantly changing throughout the life of the project. And when you take that approach, a lot of times you'll face different challenges as you're going through the different phases of that project. So I'll use an example. Right now, we're actively going through the permitting phase of the project. With this being a new technology and innovative project, it's a first of a kind. There are not models and examples that you can rely on to say, how do I navigate this particular challenge that I'm facing to make sure that I'm able to get my permit, for an example, in a timely manner. And for me, the thing that I've always fallen back on, similar to what Jules has said, is knowing that you have the tools inside of you to be successful. A lot of times, it's not having to think outside of the box, but use the tools that you have to be able to navigate that challenge and take a step back to see that big picture. And so with that in mind, Embracing change is critical. Things are always evolving. Technology is changing even as you build out that project. So be open to embracing that change. Be open to adapting and being flexible as you build out that project.
Absolutely, great input.
I just want to pick up on something else that I think Jules said that I think is critical too, because sometimes, and again, like as Black people, we don't always see people in positions that we want to be in or aspire to, that then give us the framework for, oh, I can be that, or that's how I get there. We don't even see it, right? I live in Baltimore, Maryland, where 30% of the population is at or below the poverty line. We average roughly 300 murders a year for a city of 600,000. It's absurd, right? And I've been in Baltimore for 22 continuous years because I'm committed to making this region of the country better, right? And so, but we miss these examples. But like, there's something that Jules said in there that I think is important for us to pick up. Like, even if you're in a job where you're a project manager, you're a product manager, you're an IT help desk professional in an organization, you can be doing things that lead you to your destiny, right? And you could be doing those things every single day and walking right past them and not even like, recognizing that you're walking past $1 million opportunities. Like Jewel, right? What she saw was like, I'm doing a job every day, right? I hate my job every day, but like she found a problem that existed within that job that, again, nobody else could see that because they're not as close to it. So what are the problems that are close to the work that you're doing today that can be solved with technology, that are scalable, that somebody's gonna pay you millions of dollars for, right? Those are the kinds of things that I think we need to just lean into as much as we can.
I think that's a great point. I'm glad you added that. Let's double back on that because it's come up a couple of times. The importance of, or the value of having mentors and people that you can aspire to, bounce ideas off of, look up to. The power of what you both are building and having funds where you can embrace that type of program. I know it's got to be terrible to see what's going on with the Fearless Fund. It's got to be terrible to see what's going on with affirmative action and college. It's got to be terrible to think of what can happen as this goes down. How do you think about that in terms of protecting what you've built and the potential for fragility of it, given how far it could possibly take us?
I mean, I come from an environment, my father did 20 years in prison, all my cousins were in jail, all that stuff. Like, if I overcome all that, like, I'm not worried about nothing, right? Like, nothing is gonna deter me from the mission, right? And the mission is for Black people to get money, period, point blank, right? Equitably, right? We need to, like, this is the last bastion, last stalwart that is preventing us, this inequity, right, that exists within our society today. You talk about like all the money in the U.S. that gets invested. It's $86 trillion a year. $86 trillion a year, right? And less than 1.4% of that is going to Black or women-led organizations, right? So like that's the game, and that's what is being withheld from us, and why this fight is being so perniciously fought, right, by them, right? And Jewel fits both those boxes, right? Think about that, right? Like it's doubly bad for us, right? And so what I say to that is act with courage, right? Act with courage, despite the fact that the enemy has these traps that they've set for you. That's always going to be the case. If it's not that knife fight, it's going to be another knife fight somewhere else. So you've got to pick and choose your battles. But like it's not directing any of the sort of investing activity or changing any of the investing activity that we're engaged in. We're being smart. We've got good counsel, good lawyers that help us make sure that we've got the right wording on our websites and all the other stuff. But like if they're gonna come for you, they're gonna come for you, period, point blank. Yeah. But I hope that the work I've done, the relationships I've built, the networks that I've built will be strong enough to support me through any challenges that I face.
Yeah, the mission's the mission, right? Is stay on it. Julie, you have any thoughts?
Plenty. But I think it's really important to put all of this in context in history. And the thing is, there's nothing new under the sun. Mm-hmm. It's just comes in different flavors, comes in different packages. But people wanting to tear down what we've built, has always been the case. Yeah. So for me, that's helpful because it makes me realize that number one, it means I've built something that's deemed a threat. Mm. And I send my love, and we're in Atlanta, so we're Fearless Fund's nearest neighbors. And so I really hate that they've been targeted in the way that they have. But the reality is, it's the same thing that's always happened. Right. And I think you always see these, anytime there is a step change as far as progress, there is a nasty fight against it. So putting it in that context and recognizing that it's nothing new, it's you know, there were the same types of conversations and same things happening 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 100 years ago, 300 years ago. And understanding that, I think, is really important to maintaining focus on the mission and not being deterred by the ups and downs and what everyone's talking about in lawsuits and all of this. It's really just, I go to work every day. As Luke aptly pointed out, we're trying to get more resources, dollars in the hands of Black innovators so that they can provide for their families and their families can continue to plant seeds for communities. That's what we're doing this for. And so as much as we can say tunnel vision on that mission, that's what we got to do.
Yeah, I love the historical perspective, right? Like, hey, Reconstruction, Tulsa, civil rights, like this is what it is. At least if I'm in this position, that means I'm one of the blessed ones that can actually help out and change things. A very good perspective. You know, Lloyd, on the corporate side, I would imagine. I mean, you're younger, you're darker, you're like, you know, like the idea of, you know, it's got to be important to have not just sponsors, but collaboration. I would imagine it can be lonely. But is that a projection on my part, or is that accurate?
It's not. It's pretty accurate. The opportunities that I've been presented with in my career has been based a lot on relationships, and in those champions, people that were championing for me when I wasn't present in the room. And a lot of that came from the relationships and people when I first joined the company, taking me under their wings and saying, hey, you need to meet this person. This person is very influential, or this person will be a person that will be with you and you can go and you can ask and have those real conversations that you may not be able to have that conversation with someone else that don't look like you. Growing up, I grew up in a small rural town called Windsor. My graduating class consisted of 100 students. Out of the 100 students, there were 5 people of color. And out of the 5 people of color, only 3 were Black. So for me, going to Howard University, I'll never forget, my mentor came to the school and he said, hey, I'm going to do a tour at Howard. You should really go with me and see the university. And stepping on that campus and seeing other people that looked like me, that were lawyers, that were dentists, that were engineers, doctors, scientists, journalists, that was instrumental in me saying, I'm going to Howard. I don't care what I have to do. I will be there. But it changed my perspective of life. Growing up in that type of environment, you don't have that exposure to people that look like you that could be your dentist, right? So growing up, it taught me a lot. Going to Howard taught me tools to survive in a way that you may be in a room of people that don't look like you. And managing this project, it's the first offshore wind, the first project that I managed for offshore wind. It was the first offshore wind project built in federal waters in the entire United States. So as you can imagine, I was in a room with a lot of people that did not look like me, and most of the time I was the only one. And unfortunately, that's still the same. But what, for me, has been one of the key objectives, even as a leader on this project, is knowing that diversity is a big issue that is in this industry, and that's what we're facing. How can I change that? So being a little bit more purposeful about recruiting when I'm building out my team. So going to different organizations like the American Association of Blacks in Energy, or like NSBE, to recruit for engineers that are people of color that can and are capable of performing this work that may not have these opportunities. So for me, it's about giving back, being a part of the change. Even though I'm in a leadership role, reaching back and making sure that I have people that are in the background that are being developed that can step up and lead this going forward.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. We had a conversation earlier today. We were talking with some folks in finance, and they were saying one of the things they think is most important going forward is having financial literacy. This is one foundational issue. If we could develop more financial literacy, we could solve a lot of wealth gap, a lot of issues. It feels like tech literacy in some ways is adjacent. We all have some baseline version of that because we're very tech savvy with apps and things like that, and it's ubiquitous in where we live. But going forward, if you were advising younger folks that are trying to build careers and futures based on the world that you know is coming, How do we build that? Where do we go for it? What should we be majoring in? What should we be studying? Where should we be working?
Yeah, I mean, my last company hired, created the whole engineering team, right? Like, we didn't have an engineering team. We built it from scratch, 12-person engineering team, world-class engineers. To hire engineers, you've got to understand product from, idea inception to revenue, right? And so I had to lean. I was not a product manager. I didn't have product management chops. That was not what I came from. I had been an M&A attorney, right? And then before that, I was mostly in a strategic corporate role within another startup that we had, built up and sold successfully. But I didn't have to, mess around with the product too much. And so what I did was I leaned into every single hard problem, right? Like, there's a saying that we say as Black people, all skin folk ain't your
Kinfolk,
right? But all kinfolk ain't your, right? So even though, like, some of these white dudes were on my team that were exposing me to hard, how we were solving some of the hard problems that we were solving, right? And using things like React Native, right? We were one of the first apps to use React Native, maybe the first 5. We were on their GitHub page. I leaned into that. Every time I heard something I didn't understand, or I didn't know, or I didn't understand how it applied to what we were doing, I would just lean into that even more. So I was soaking up their knowledge as much as I could. So I tell us to, not just cross those boundaries sometimes beyond the trust factor and continue to use your intuition and your gut to guide you, right? Because a lot of times, we will stay away from certain communities because there's a lack of trust, right? And there's a lack of trust because there's a history of
well earned,
that's well earned, right? Of exploitation and other things, right? And that's well deserved, right? And so for us as entrepreneurs, as folks that want to build great businesses, et cetera, that use software, et cetera, I think it's important for us to lean into those problems as much as we can. If you don't understand a thing, look it up 1,000 times. Look it up on Google. By the end of my journey at Fix, I knew our whole system front to back. I could talk about integration, software, every aspect of our software I could talk about, right? And I think that's what we expect from you as a CEO. Like, you can't start a company and think that you're going to start a thing and, oh, my CTO's got that. No, you need to be able to understand that too. How are you going to hire a CTO?
After a brief break, we'll learn what excites our panelists about emerging tech and how they see it being applied to today's challenges.
That's great. And there's also an element of, a huge element of humility in that, because the first few times you're asking, you got to be like an idiot for a while you're going through it. And hey, I know, dumb question, fifth time I asked it, but I really need to understand this.
That's right.
Jewel, thoughts on where should we be leveraging our time to make sure we can take advantage of this next wave?
I think the biggest thing is around critical thinking, because all of the easy tasks are being automated. AI, it's interesting because I built an AI company starting over 10 years ago. So I've been able to watch the progression of this type of technology over the last decade. And I will say the last, let's call it 24 months, the pace and speed of the acceleration of this technology is mind-blowing for me, someone who's been watching it for the past decade and participating. So I say that to say, when people talk about ChatGPT and large language models and generative AI and all of these words that you may be hearing but not really dialing into, or maybe you are, hopefully you are, just know that the consequence of all of these things right now is that all the easy stuff, all the automated things that can be automated will be automated. And so that leaves the responsibility on those of us who are in industry and working to up-level our ability to think, because the machines are doing the non-thinking things and some of the thinking things soon, And so we have to be in a position where we're really strong on the strategy, the critical thinking skills, even the creative pieces of business. Those are where I think we need to be sharpening, because everything else is going to be taken care of pretty much by machines. So not to be
No, it's not doom and gloom, but it's real.
but
It's
the
here now. I
reality,
mean, it's,
yeah.
you know, it's taking the first pass that paralegals used to take. So like you said, it's not just non-thinking work, it's thinking work. It's just doing the first pass that the consulting analyst did. It's doing the first M&A pass. It's doing, right? It's doing the first diagnostic in the hospital. It's a lot. I mean, you can do a lot with the AI.
Yeah.
Lloyd, thoughts here? Where would you tell somebody, you know, knowing what you've seen and knowing what skills are required, knowing what mindsets are required, where would somebody invest their time so they could be on the same path going forward?
I would say let's take a step back and evaluate how you can support the new technology, the new things that are coming to market. One of the things that I'm noticing as we start to roll out, I'll use solar for an example, is how do you maintain that? It has to be maintained. There's operational components of that. And as Jules mentioned, there has been a lot of investments in how to actually build the technology, but the next step of that is maintaining it. These renewable facilities, for an example, an offshore wind farm has a life of 30 years. So that's 30 years that this technology has to be installed in a maritime environment and be able to operate efficiently. And so with that comes time, it takes resources, and it takes people to be able to maintain that. So that would be the next step.
Great point. That field, that MRO field, that maintain and repair field is like, you know, ends up being many times bigger than the build field, because like you said, I build it for a year, I maintain it for the next 30 or 40, and who's going to fill that gap? These are great points. You mentioned, you know, when you talk about like some of the things that are coming up next, what are some of the trends that you're excited about? And the reason I ask this is, like, you know, we were talking before about separating the wheat from the sticks, right? So, you know, Betamax comes out, it's the coolest thing, and it dies. You know, Google Glasses come out, it's the coolest thing, and it dies. But then some of those things come back, and it's like, wow, maybe it was just a good idea at a bad time, or things like that. And we're seeing a lot of that now, where there's a lot of, it's so fast, it's just so many things are coming out. It's hard to separate the wheat from the sticks, but it sounds like you're close enough that you might have some ideas on where you think you'd place your bets. Luke, why don't you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the trend in AI is certainly interesting, and for all the reasons that everybody on this stage has talked about. But I think on a real ground level, practical level, when I think about the application of it to, you know, let's say the first 6 steps that you go through in building a thing, right? I think AI can have a transformative effect on the number of entrepreneurial ideas that can germinate, right? Because there was a time where you had to spend a lot of time in the lab thinking through and testing and, you know, having tons and tons and tons of customer dialogue. AI can do a lot of that work for us today. You know, I wouldn't necessarily call ChatGPT, you know, the solution to building a company, but if you're looking for signal that can help you refine, you know, these points that you need to validate as an entrepreneur in the first like 5 or 6 steps, AI I think can do that massively for us. I also think about like different parts of AI applied to the pipeline, right? Like, because what it takes to actually get to a ChatGPT is a large language model that has been refined with tons and tons of data and information that, you know, over time they've been able to derive insights that tell us that when you ask it this, it really, you know, this should be the answer, right? And so like that takes time, right? And a lot of organizations today struggle with this, but they got tons of data, right? Let's you know, look at, you know, the Washington Wizards, for example. Just one Washington Wizards game is going to produce, you know, petabytes of data, right? From the people interacting in the actual arena to what's happening to like their ticketing and their media properties during the you know, event, et cetera, right? And a lot of these organizations, they struggle going from that pile of information to some usable, you know, system or some usable application of that information to drive sales, retention, or something else that they care about. And so all that stuff in the middle today is what I see as opportunity for folks to build more of that infrastructure layer that will lead to the better, more refined approach to how that data actually gets harvested. So, you know, and I think there's the bridge here for Black founders is that, again, when Black founders come with their ideas and their thinking, you know, to these kinds of problems, it's unreal the kinds of solutions that we deliver. So I want to tell you about Ben Harvey, one of our first investments. from a company called AI Squared. Ben Harvey grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. He calls it Jack and Kill, Florida, because he grew up there in the 80s, six brothers and sisters in a two-room house, right? The most money his mother and father ever made was like 40 grand a year. And I think that year they took a vacation to like down the street to the beach, right? And so comes from abject poverty, worked his way through not one, not two, but 3 black colleges to get a PhD and become the head of data science at the NSA, where he saw this problem, happening, and was able to start building a solution to address it, and didn't really know his journey, but kept asking questions, got a job at Databricks, and then asked the founders questions about the thing that he was building. That led to Databricks investing in this thing. And then I came on board, invested also, NEA led the seed rounds, and now this thing is off the ground. He's got a real chance to build a billion-dollar company, right? And he comes from nothing, right? And so I think the power of these, transformative technologies is not just the technology itself, it's what happens, right? The special magic that I think happens when you get black people who have, immense ranging experiences. All of us don't grow up in Pequanix projects. I did, but not all of us, right? We grew up in a wild array of scenarios, but when you apply those to technology problems that are really hard, like AI, you get those kinds of results, and I think we're just at the beginning of that.
Very exciting. Other trends you're excited about?
Man, that sounds like a good deal. You need to send that one to me.
100%.
I'm always excited, back to what I was saying earlier about, we see problems that other people may not see. That's the thing that I'm most excited about, is that the problems and the gaps are widening. That's not a good thing. But I think we are in a unique time in history where we actually do have access to the technology to build. The speed to get something to market is fast. And we're living with these real deep problems that we can go after. So I'm thinking about climate, for an example, and the fact that I'm originally from Nashville, I think I may have mentioned. And Nashville, every year there's a major flood, maybe a month ago, huge tornado. I mean, what's happening in our climate, weather, however you want to frame it, is wild. And it's like, I'm thinking, am I going to be able to make it back home today, because it's supposed to be some crazy weather situation going on in Atlanta. And so if you think about all of the problems that creates, from the insurance industry to, how do you do the repairs and maintenance on these homes that are getting destroyed? Just looking out and seeing that there are some real things going on, and then thinking about how do you use technology now that the path to getting something out to market is so much shorter. How can you address these things? Yeah. That to me is the opportunity, and that's when we're looking for founders. We're looking for people that are seeing, okay, this seems like something is happening in time where there's more of these situations going on. The industries that have historically addressed them are not equipped. All the insurance models are jacked up because, this is not what it's been. It does not align with how the risk models have been created over time. And so there's just these opportunities that are happening right now. So again, if your eyes are open, and you're seeing that you have the access to the technology, if you have a computer, you have it. Even if you don't have a computer, you can go to the library and get something going. And the opportunities are huge. And that's where the big billion-dollar businesses can be built, where the market is huge. It affects everybody. It's not just something that's niche for Black people, or it's something that everyone is impacted by. That's what's exciting to me.
It is exciting.
Yeah.
It is exciting. Lloyd, can I shift gears a little bit? I want to ask you a question based on what Jewel just said, really about this balance between innovation and ethics. So we're now in this place where, you take this climate change example, right? So who wouldn't want to charge their car at home? That sounds super convenient. No longer waiting at the pump. That sounds great. It's got a 6,000-pound battery. It's hard as hell to mine. It's got some other issues with the supply chain. Nobody knows where to put them when they're done, but it's pretty cool to be able to plug in your car at home, right? You have these trade-offs where in real time, you're making decisions for a very, very long term, infrastructurally. Should I keep putting up these charging ports before I figure this out, or will I figure it out when I do it, right? The AI conversation, same thing, right? It's like, Are they going to take us over at some point, or should we figure it out maybe in the beginning, or just wait and see how we can deal with it when it comes, right? Or who loses, who wins? How do you think about that trade-off? Who should be at the table making those decisions? What are the checks? You know, and how do you think it's done in your organization?
Yeah. So as a regulated utility, it's important that we engage all of our stakeholders. Whenever we're building out a project, it's important that we go through a process to ensure that it's prudent to our ratepayers. And with that involves bringing in multiple stakeholders that have various backgrounds, whether it's people from our business development team, or whether it's people that are from our community outreach team that looks at the social economic impacts to our customers when we're considering a project. And so it's important that you engage all the stakeholders. And one of the things that I'm actually excited about and I'm starting to see a lot more of is the integration of those innovative technologies to solve those type of problems. What that does is it also forces multiple stakeholders to come together. So you may have someone that has a background in manufacturing that's now meeting with a company that develops these technologies that provides a platform for you to be able to remotely monitor things. And you see those two companies come together to provide a resource that solves all your issues, but it also helps us as a utility. An example I give, for the project I'm working on, one of the things that we had to consider was the visual impact. So the wind turbines located 27 miles off the coast. However, our clients have homes that are located on the beach. We have tourists that go to Virginia Beach for vacation. So for us, the visual impact was very critical to make sure that we were able to engage the stakeholders early, but also ensure that they were able to see what it would look like once that wind farm was built. As you mentioned before, the development phase is a multi-year project. So with that, we were able to work with a company that provides technology that allows you to develop a visual element where clients and our customers were able to come to open houses and actually see what the visual impact would look like once this wind farm was built versus what the visual impact looks like today without any wind turbines out there. So for me, I'm excited about the integration of the technology, but as far as who to engage, I would say you have to engage multiple stakeholders. It's your customers, it's your business side of things, it's your legal side of things, it's your engineering side of things, and it's also your business development team. They're looking 10 years ahead of where the market trends are going. As you mentioned, with historical weather data, it's a little skewed, but it's important that we have the right people at the table.
Yeah. Great answer. Jewel, Luke, my sense is that Amazon's not pulling together stakeholders when they're taking down stores and doing copycat versions of products, and that the music industry and the arts industry is not doing that when they're stealing things with AI and recreating their own content. So how do you police this, right? How do you ensure that it's fair, make sure that there is an ethical way to progress, but still not keep the genie in the bottle?
It's tough. It's really tough because a lot of times, and this goes back to the founding of companies, oftentimes, particularly in Silicon Valley, these companies are founded in a bubble, and they're founded with very monochromatic teams that look all the same. And so, and typically, they're not even thinking about any of this stuff until they have a press article come out or someone raise a flag and say, hey guys, maybe we should think about this a little bit differently. And typically that person's on the outside. And so what we're seeing right now is we're having to do a lot of backtracking to damage that. It's kind of like the train has already left the station, and now we're trying to fix a lot of things that maybe, I'm gonna say it's unfixable, but it would have been a lot easier to put it into the design at the beginning.
Yeah.
And so that is the great thing that we get as early stage investors to help our companies be mindful of the implications of some of the decisions that they're making today, to make sure that the teams that they are building are diverse and thinking about things that may impact people that they're not even aware of, to make sure that how we're building boards from a governance standpoint is also diverse and inclusive and helping people to understand what the implications might be down the line for some of the decisions that they're making. So I think that's the beauty and the reason to, I don't know how many people in the audience are entrepreneurs or thinking about getting into building a business, but that's the beauty of ownership, is that you get the power to make the decisions and be mindful and be thoughtful, and bring people into the design from the beginning so that you're not having 10 years down the line to say, uh-oh, we messed up, we broke something, and try to backtrack from there.
Another very thoughtful advocacy for diversity, I think. You'll never know what you don't know, but the more perspective you have, the less likely it is to be something that's potentially fatal.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing it in real life, right? Like, not to get too technical, but within the branch of data science, relative to like how these large language models get created and deployed. And again, these are things that we use every day, like ChatGPT, and even some aspects of like how self-driving works in our cars. And I'm not talking about just Teslas, right? Like, so it's being deployed in a lot of ways, right? But when I think about all the ways that it's being deployed today, I think there are opportunities within that, within the ways that it's being deployed, to be thoughtful about like what are the inputs, right? So one of the big problems within data science today is called hallucination, right? Where these models, when they get to scale, now you're using them, they kind of recreate themselves, and like they might perceive a thing that looks like a bad credit risk from somebody, from the perspective of like the data that's gone into this model, and now this model's being used to figure out like credit ratings really quickly for people, in a millisecond, right? Like there are banks that are trying to engage these kind of technologies this way, right? And so what's happening is these hallucination models are sprouting up that are, identifying things that are bad credit risk that really don't belong in that bucket.
It's got some inherited bias.
Exactly,
Yeah.
It's because of the biases that go into how we create these. So I think from a data science perspective, absolutely, from an AI perspective, we've got to be thoughtful about like the data going into it and having a wider array of people. Like, this big thing that's happened recently with OpenAI, I look at, and the people behind it are brilliant technologists, but none of them look like us, right? Right? Like I look at
And
the
they're
whole
not all
team.
that brilliant, by the way.
And they're not even that brilliant. Thank you. And they're not even all that brilliant, right? Mostly been an entrepreneur. He wasn't
Right
like
place, right time.
right place, right time, right? And so I think we got to pay more attention to like what's actually going into these models and making sure we're at the table from a data science perspective, from a business perspective, right? Like I think we've got to be at those same tables doing all the things that Jewel mentioned in terms of making sure that we've got diverse boards, that we've got diverse management in our companies, and that we just have a seat at the table. One of the roles that I have is the transition team for our $65 billion pension within the state of Maryland. And one of the things that we are starting to use in the state of Maryland is the identification of certain risk factors as things that we should bake into how we think about deploying capital, right? And the first one is climate, right? And because everybody realizes that if you're not thinking about climate as part of the strategy in building a company, right? And that I'm gonna now give you investment in that company and you're not taking that factor into consideration, that's a risk, right? And I should think about that when I'm thinking about this fund manager that's baked in the risk versus this fund manager that's baked in the risk. And so we're gonna draw a straight line between that and diversity, because diversity should be seen as a risk as well. It's awful that we've got to shoehorn it that way because, quite frankly, America does not have the appetite to really absorb the reality, right, that we need to create a more diverse and equitable playing field, for all. We're not really ready to absorb that fully. But, until we get there, we're going to have to do things oftentimes that lead us to the same outcome using strategies and tactics that I think are tied to data, quantitative analysis, and some of the things that we're talking about on this stage.
Yeah, that was great points.
Okay, my name is Jasmine Douglas, and I heard a couple things. Jewel, you're from a more rural area, and you went to Howard. And then I heard Luke say that you've been in Baltimore for 22 years. So I would like you all take on building a business in your backyard. Do you think staying in your hometown gives you a ceiling?
So my perspective on that is it's really, really, really hard to build a business, and you want to do the things that are going to give you the best opportunity to win. In my case, what I knew is I wanted to be close to people who love me and close to people who I knew who I could call when I needed something and I could navigate. So when I was building Part Pick, there was a big push for me to move back to Silicon Valley. I'd already lived there, so I knew what it was, and I knew that the support that I needed, the access that I needed, I wasn't gonna be able to get out there. So for me, it made sense to stay in Atlanta where I was, where I knew people, where I knew that I could navigate kind of the system, and I felt like that would give me the best opportunity to win. I sold my company to Amazon, so the ceiling, that was the ceiling for me. That's what I wanted to happen, and so it didn't exist, even though I was in a place that wasn't considered at that time to be, a place to build a tech startup. So I say that to say it's a personal question of what's most important to you and where do you feel like you can have the best opportunity to win. Sometimes it may make sense to pick up your stuff and move to a place where you have more advantages, and that's really a personal decision. But I think it's measured by what do you think you're gonna need to win for whatever it is that you're trying to build. Where are the resources? Can you get access to them wherever you are, or do you need to go somewhere else? But those are kind of the questions that you have to ask yourself when deciding where should you actually locate.
Wow. Well, great, I think, finish to this conversation and to this conference. We're the capstone event here. So really honored to be a part of this discussion. Really appreciate you, Luke, Jewel, and Lloyd for coming out and sharing. Audience, please give them one last round of applause. Thank you for the time.
Thank you to our guests, Luke Cooper, Jewel Burke-Solomon, and Lloyd Ely, and our moderator, Aaron Montgomery. Special thanks to JMI, Virginia State University, and the Big Dipper Innovation Summit partners for convening this vital conversation. Learn more about Big Dipper Innovation by staying connected with us. Join our community of founders at BigDipperSummit.com.